Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this latest interview in which I, Natasha Kaplinsky, have the very great pleasure of interviewing some of the industry's most prominent personalities. I'm delighted to introduce this time Oliver Prill, who is Chief Executive Officer at SME business bank Tide. Now, 2 months ago, Tide announced its £25 million win in BCR funding in partnership with Clearbank. Well, this on top of their previous 60 million Pool A fund win from February 2019. Certainly not bad going. Well, I'm thrilled to be talking to Oliver today. And Oliver, great to have the time with you. You've been in the industry, haven't you, for some 20 years or so. For those who don't know you so well, perhaps you could start by telling us a bit about yourself and what motivates you, and also a bit about your vision for the future.
Yeah, delighted to be here, by the way. Thank you for inviting me. I've been in the business for well over 20 years. God, time does clock on, right? When you're having fun. And, I've been in the business in many ways in financial services the entire time. Started out in consulting, and really when I started off, there was just an intellectual interest in how we can make financial services better. But as I progressed as a consultant, I've seen just that the established business models were not really working very well. And so I started off with, when the internet wave one came, with a sort of innovation, if you want, inside large corporates. So I moved from McKinsey to Direct Line, and with Direct Line led the wave one of the e-commerce, sort of the internetization, if you want, digitization of insurance. Very exciting piece, and really learning to disrupt making the industry better for consumers in that way. I then continued on that journey with various stages, including building and selling a bank in Germany. And as I went through this sort of journey, I realized this is not only around disruption of the industry, but also making things better for customers. And so one sector that I've always been dealing with was small businesses, and anyone that's in the industry will tell you they're underserved, but very few people have actually done anything about it. And so when the opportunity with Tide came about, so Tide had already started by Tide's founder, it was sort of just getting to a few thousand customers. The opportunity arose to take that to the next level as the chief executive. So I jumped on it. I realized that this is a wonderful opportunity to do things very differently and much better for small businesses, which I care deeply
about. Fantastic. Can you tell us a bit more then, because it's such an interesting journey, about the Tide DNA and what makes the company so unique?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting one, right? Because when we think you introduced us as a bank, and we're actually not technically a bank, we're a business financial platform. But we start somewhere completely different. We actually start with the customer, and who we call member. So for us, they're member, and it's part of our mindset of really being very focused on the customer in a very specific way. So you become a member of Tide, and our mission is to save you time. Anyone that's been a small business owner or worked, for freelance will realize that really no one goes into small business or being a freelancer or an entrepreneur for doing the financial admin. It's a sort of necessary evil, if you want, that takes a lot of time because things don't really work very well together. And so what Tide set out is a mission to effectively help small businesses radically reduce the time that they spend on financial admin by making everything work together like clockwork. And that's why we consider ourselves a business financial platform. So we don't only deal with banking, but we deal with all the financial admin that a small business would have, invoicing, expense management, payroll, accounting. And our core objective is to make everything work together like clockwork. Right? So you can write an invoice, you can immediately factor the invoice, you can insure the invoice, you can see how many invoices are open, you can auto chase the invoice. When the money comes in, your invoice gets attached to it. All of that gets pushed into your accounting system. So all of these previously separate tasks that took a lot of time work like clockwork with Tide, and we're really saving our members time with that. And that's in part been the sort of secret of our success. So we've got over 270,000 members. with 310,000 accounts, so quite a large number. That's about nearly 5% of all UK SMEs. So 1 in 20 SMEs effectively does their financial affairs through Tide, which I think shows that we've been doing the right thing for many of the SMEs out there.
Absolutely, and such a growing business. So talk to us a bit more then about your partnership with Clearbank and how that came about.
Yeah, so we're a business financial platform, and so as part of this business financial platform, we don't actually try to self-manufacture all the products. So the way we think about the world is that you can either have a tight label product or a third-party product. So if you look at current accounts, the tight label product is really done together with Clearbank. So Clearbank is technically the bank that provides the product, and we call it the tight current account. So it's a bit like your iPhone that may be manufactured by somewhere else, but it still comes from Apple. So Tide designs the product, but it's sort of manufactured by Clearbank. And so we have a partnership in that vein, because we've decided very early on that we don't really want to self-manufacture products. Because if you start doing that around the sort of 100 products that we offer on the platform, you would get very, very distracted. So we really have these tight labels. And next to tight labels, we also allow third-party accounts to be used. So, within a couple of quarters, you will actually be able to connect your NatWest or your HSBC account into the Tide platform and also use that. So you will have a choice between the Tide label account and a third-party account. Because Clearbank is the sort of manufacturer of our Tide label current account, we have a very, very close relationship with them. In many ways, the current account is key to making all of these things work like clockwork on the business financial platform. And so we have a very, very deep relationship that in the end, helped us also to win the awards that you mentioned in your introduction.
Absolutely. So open banking has formed a significant part, hasn't it, to Tide and Clearbank's recent successful BCR bid. Can you tell me a bit more about how you're planning to use open banking and the role that you see open banking playing, if you like, in Tide going forward?
Yeah, so we think open banking is absolutely critical. It's a really important part to the entire way fintech will work going forward, or financial services will work going forward. But the way we think about open banking, it is a means to an end, right? So you always need to think about use cases that are helpful for the member or the customer, right? Rather than, so I'm always slightly amused with these surveys where it says like how many businesses or customers will adopt open banking. Anyone that's close to customers will tell you that they don't really understand open banking. They probably don't care about open banking. What they care about the use cases behind it. So what can I do with open banking? And really, open banking in that vein for Tide is really a way of connecting third-party accounts into Tide. So a key part of the win is the ability to, next to the Tide label current account, that you will be able to actually connect your business account with another bank into the Tide platform. And I think this is where the competition very, very radically will change, not overnight, but in the next couple of years, where previously, effectively, when you said my current account was with Bank X, you would do your business banking with Bank X. In future, what open banking will do and the way we will embed it, you can still say my business account is with Bank X, but I do my banking through the Tide platform. And that's really what you will be able to do. The key use case will be that you can integrate your third-party business current account on the Tide platform and still do the sort of thing that I explained, the invoicing, the expense management, the accounting. All of that, at the interaction layer will be with via Tide, and we will use open banking to then integrate with the Bank X in this particular example.
Mm. Do you see more partnerships like this on the horizon?
So for us, the way we look at it, if you stay with current accounts, for one, we always think there's one Tide current account. People wouldn't really understand that. So our partnership there with Clearbank is very solid, and we're very, very happy with Clearbank. It's a very deep and good partnership. The partnerships on third party, in a way, is a very one-sided one, right? Because it's really the member that decides to connect their account. So Bank X in this example doesn't really have much of a say. And so that's we wouldn't call that partnerships. However, on the other product verticals, we are working with. So, for example, we're working very, very hard to expand our lending network. So we don't really, as Tide, do our own lending, at least not at scale. But we work with third-party lenders that will have their products on the platform. So we're expanding very massively there. In accounting, we've already signed up all the leading accounting platforms, and in due course, we'll select a partner for the Tide Label accounting tool. So there will be a lot of partnerships coming up in other product verticals. But on the current account, really our relationship with the Tide Label product with Clearbank is the one that we want to stay with.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that then. So could you explain a little bit more about that partnership with Clearbank and how that might improve banking services for the SME market?
Yeah, exactly. So, our thesis about how banking evolves is sort of predicated on a couple of sort of dimensions. So the first one is that in banking, unlike, let's say, search engines, there will not be a winner takes all. Right. So I often speak to investors who say, like, who will dominate the UK SME market, have 80%? I say no one, right? Because once you have that, the regulator quite rightly will step in. So we believe there should really not be a player that has significantly beyond 15% market share. That's when the government intervened the last time with the big five. And so the first thing to say about our model is we do not believe, it will be dominating the UK, as there will not be any particular play that will dominate. Secondly, one of the very bizarre things for someone, you mentioned I'm over 20 years in the industry, is that when we grew up, right, in an industry where there was only one business model. So the universal bank was there, and therefore we make the mistake of saying there was one previous model, there will be one model going forward. If we look at every other industry, that's actually not the case. Look at retail. I mean, retail, you have a very different set. You have people that are horizontally integrated, that offer anything together with apparel and food and so on. Some people are vertically integrated. Some of them are more online. Some of them are more offline. So people have choice. And so the second thing, our second thesis, is that a healthy SME market should not be dominated by players that completely look alike, but players that give choice. And that brings me to the third bit, which is what our business model is. So we think one of the parts of where we offer choice is we want to be the go-to place for SMEs that really want to save time in their admin. We do recognize, for example, if you are a small business accountant, right, maybe one or two people, you may really love to do all the accounting yourself, right? And probably then Tide is not the ideal platform because we try to automate that for you. So we really want to serve those that want to get rid of the admin, and part of that in our model is that we will not self-manufacture product. We will work with partners that manufacture the product for us, and we will relentlessly focus on making sure these things work seamlessly together.
It's very interesting hearing how you kind of assess the market and the divisions within it. And it strikes me that Tide is a company that's never going to sit still, is always looking for opportunities. So can you talk to me a little bit more about those opportunities that you might see on the horizon for Tide?
A really good question. So the first thing, I'm really glad that you asked about the horizon rather than the end state. So often I get asked what the end state is, and you have people from the established industry players saying that we have this vision for the end state. So the first thing, Tide doesn't believe there will be an end state. So that's the very, very important. We think the world we now live in will be one of continuous innovation. Things will go much, much faster, and there will be permanent disruption. So in many ways, we will continue to look to evolve our business model. In the more short term, really, it's about making the business financial platform more holistic. So we're basically filling in the holes, right, of where we haven't. So at the moment, you have to have a Tide Label current account, to take that example we discussed earlier, and you can't have third-party current accounts. We will rectify that in the next couple of quarters. We will build out our lending proposition. We will build out our accounting proposition. So a lot of the things that, in theory, we would ideally have on the platform yesterday, will take realistically a couple of quarters to integrate. And so that's really what we're focusing on, just filling in the blank spaces, as it were, on the platform play.
Absolutely. Disruption, innovation, all key words, aren't they, within the industry? So let's have a bit of a temperature check then. I mean, nobody could have predicted what was going to happen in 2020. The pandemic has just shot all forecasts out the window, hasn't it? But in relation to reality versus expectations, where are you?
So, I hate these sort of terminologies of COVID winners and COVID losers because, I mean, like it
Mm,
sort of suggests that people want to benefit from the pandemic, which is, of course, a terrible thing. I mean, none of us wanted that. We do realize it caused not only the health suffering, so not only lives, but also it hit a lot of people in livelihoods, including, of course, many, many SMEs. However, the picture has been a lot more complicated on SMEs. So while, especially if you were high street oriented, you really suffered. We've also seen a period where the entrepreneurial, you know, cast, if you want, and that's sort of the notion of what it makes an entrepreneur, that a lot of people changed their business model and a lot of people went into grabbing new opportunities. So the net story from Tide, which in many ways reflects the SME sector, is we've never seen faster growth. Where the big banks effectively were not able to open business current accounts and to serve these new businesses coming along, we've been able to continue to sustain that. And so we've had growth. Probably Tide has never grown in relative or absolute numbers as quickly as in the last couple of quarters. We've seen in the membership base a very, very diverse set of reactions to it. With some people, suffering, tremendous pain. Through this, we actually just launched a Tide charity to help address that a little bit. But at the other end, there are a lot of small businesses that are doing extremely well out of the crisis who've adjusted to the new world. So these are people that have become more digital or are in services that in the pandemic have been thriving, right? So online retail, etc. So Tide overall has done, quite well out of the crisis. So we are ahead of almost every one of our metrics. But I should sort of stress that this is, if I could have chosen in February whether we should have the
mm.
pandemic or not, of course I would have selected not that we shouldn't have the pandemic. It
Uh,
is, a terrible thing, and we do feel, very sorry for all the businesses that have been very adversely affected by the crisis. But the story is a little bit more complicated than just to say that everyone has suffered.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of very distressing implications, but many companies have pivoted very successfully, haven't they? So, when you are looking forwards and you're looking to project, is it possible to have, as you like, a business strategy for the next 5 years?
Yeah, so the way we've always been agile, right? So that is one of the great things of being in the fintech sector. So we have a strategy that provides guardrails and the North Star where we want to go. And then we always have OKR cycles. So every quarter we reprioritize ourselves against the specific priorities we have in the environment which we operate in. So we're actually quite used to adjusting very frequently the path to Rome, if you want. We still want to go to Rome. It
Mm.
may just be a slightly different path. And so we've always had that mindset, and that helps us. That helps us with the current crisis. Now, if you ask me, I don't think, unfortunately, we've seen the end of this. We've seen the vaccine that's coming, and we hope that it will be available sooner rather than later. But anyone that's sort of realistic will know that the next 2 to 3 quarters still we will be quite exceptional, and we will, during that time, be even more agile than we are usually to try to do the best thing for our members, for our investors, and for Tide. But I think anyone that sits here and says, you've got a narrowly fixed strategy that you're going to pursue in the next couple of quarters should probably reflect on whether that's the right thing to do. Um, because we're not through this. I mean, let's just be very clear. We're not through this at all. We've got a couple of other things coming up. Like where will the Brexit scenario end? We have some of the longer term issues around like the net zero commitment by the country. We have the leveling up challenge as a country for the north. So there are a lot of challenges coming intermingling with the short term coronavirus dynamics, and therefore I think every business leader in the next couple of quarters will be well advised to be very agile and flexible about adjusting.
I think that's very well said. Agility being that key word that we all have to work with, but also how difficult it is going to be to measure the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic and all the other challenges, as you have so rightly highlighted, ahead of us. So let's take a bit of a moment then to talk about the fintech ecosystem. Can you kind of tell me a bit more about what that looks like right now in this environment?
The entire ecosystem, so if you talk about all fintechs in the UK, we really got a couple of dynamics going on. So the fintechs, or if you're in financial services, you effectively reflect the customers that you serve and how well you're doing. So we see very, very different dynamics. We in general see payment-oriented companies doing very well, small business-oriented companies doing better than consumer. So there's some sort of underlying dynamics happening in the sector. However, the sector overall will benefit from the overall trend of digitization. So one of the many dynamics that we've seen across the sectors in the crisis is that we've probably brought digitization forward by 5 to 10 years. So there were segments, and we can point directly at them in Tide, that previously would not have selected Tide because they wanted a high street branch to go to. They wanted to see their relationship manager. In the crisis, have decided, even with the branches open, that this may not be the smartest thing to do, when infection rates are high. And so, they've sort of jumped over their own reservation, if you want, and sort of went digital. So we've seen a strong digitization, and there's, in a sense that would have happened probably anyway over 5 to 10 years, but that has been brought forward. And clearly the entire fintech ecosystem is benefiting from that. And I think the third dynamic that shouldn't be underestimated has nothing to do with the crisis itself, but with Brexit and the future. So in the post-Brexit environment, there are clearly questions around regulation and how attractive fintech will be. London will be, or the UK hopefully will be, in a post-Brexit environment. I think there's some golden opportunities there for the government to deliver some of the benefits of Brexit. By making London and the UK more broadly really much even more attractive. Because if we're really honest, if you've been in the industry, the UK was in the early days with the sandboxing, at the head of the curve. In many ways, in the general narrative, that still said that London was the UK was sort of ahead. But if we really look at what happened in the last 3 to 5 years, not very much has happened. And so I think this is a golden opportunity to reinvigorate the UK's leadership in this important sector. And so that's maybe the third dynamic I would call out.
Okay, it's good to hear your optimism. Not everybody reflects that, so let's stay with that optimistic slant on where we are, and let's talk a bit about Tide as a company itself. I mean, it's not terribly old, is it? Founded or incepted certainly in 2017. You've been on a rapid rise. I mean, it seems that trajectory, certainly in relation to the pandemic as well, has been very positive and quite exciting. What have you got lined up for the future? I mean, it reflects a little bit of the conversation that we've just had about whether or not it's possible to plan. But do you have any new product launches planned perhaps for the next 24 months that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things, and because of the BCR awards that we won together with our partner Clearbank, a lot of these are in the public domain. So probably the most transformational is the one that we talked about already, which is that you will be able to hook up your third-party bank account into the Tide platform and really operate it without having a Tide current account. I think that will make Tide, will really show that Tide is very different to the established, plays that are in the market and gives real choice. The second thing we will do is we've committed ourselves to building one of the broadest and richest funding networks in the country. So we don't really focus on providing our own lending, but we are very open to third-party lenders to come to the platform and serve our members. And as we get out of the pandemic, there will be a lot of need for funding, and so we are in discussions with a very large number of lenders to come onto the platform. And we would always encourage people to reach out to us. But in the end, at Tide, you will probably see one of the richest SME-oriented lending choices that of any sort of player in the market. So that's another very, very important one coming up. And then finally, we are really building out what what we call our business services suite. So these are all the financial admin tools. So we've done a lot on invoicing, for example. There are already thousands of invoices issued on Tide every day. We think that will go 5 digits very quickly per day. So there's a lot going on the invoicing space, expense management, so that you can basically give your team members, your employees, cards and manage their limits very individually. A lot of that is going live. So a lot of exciting things are coming onto the platform that will make the proposition even richer.
Good. Can we take a moment just to talk a bit more about Tide Plus? It was launched in 2019, wasn't it? How successful has it been to date?
Yeah, so we have two what we call upgrades, so membership upgrades, one called Plus and one called Premium. And the core proposition is really contact channel. So which is very different to the consumer plans that are often compared to our plans. So in our world, we do have, because of the reach of Tide, remember 5% of the market, there are people that do want phone support, and some people do want relationship management support. And we don't start from the point of view everything needs to be ultra digital. We come from the point of view things need to be digitally enabled and need to be right for the member. And anyone that sort of does the back of the envelope of unit economics will realize that phone support and relationship support with the very attractive pricing that we're offering cannot be offered to everyone. And so Plus is really about giving 24/7 phone support. And Tide Premium is about getting a dedicated relationship manager. And we believe, unlike traditional banks where you get that assigned when you have a certain amount of turnover or whatever the criteria might be, that it should actually be self-service, so self-select. If you want to have Tide Plus, your phone support, you can order it, you can deselect it if you no longer need it, and the same thing applies to the Premium relationship manager. And so to give you some of the insights, so the relationship manager is around 1 in 100, so 1% penetration. So 1 in 100 SMEs needs a relationship manager, which is very reflective, of the market. It's really either the larger ones or members that prefer if you want, almost a personal contact. And then in terms of Tide Plus, the phone support, that was trending towards 5%. And this was broadly in line with our expectations for how many people need these services. So we've always come from the point of view of providing these additional access channels. And this is very different to consumer, where in consumer, it's a way of monetizing. So we are actually, structurally profitable at Tide. So we didn't launch the plans to subsidize, unprofitable product. We launched it to provide these additional services. So slightly different game or play for us to the consumer players that these plans are often compared with.
Okay. We're reaching the end of our time together, but I would like to look forward with you now. We've talked about COVID and the impact that has had on the market, but of course, loan applications have rocketed, haven't they, throughout the last however many months that we've been involved in the pandemic. Has that been an opportunity, even if you haven't wanted it, an opportunity to grab a bigger share of the market?
So actually the biggest driver in the market has been that the big banks have effectively stopped opening business current accounts, right? So that's been the single biggest driver. And it is a combination of the branches not being operational, people being hesitant to get into the branches, and operational priorities within the banks, right? Where they said is, look, we had, as a bank, we needed to move to working from home, and that was for us more challenging. Now for Tide, we never had those problems. For us, working from home was something we all allowed before, and almost like we flipped the switch and everyone was able to work from home. So for us, the biggest dynamic that we've seen is people desperately wanting to open business current accounts and not being able to do that with the big fives, to which, to be honest, much of the market would have defaulted to. And so, we are now seeing somewhere between 2 to 3 times the volumes of business current account openings with Tide that we would have seen pre-pandemic. And post-pandemic, we do expect that to stay high, but of course, some normalization, to occur in the market. So yes, it has been an opportunity in that sense, but I come back to the point of view is, even though we're doing it, and of course, in many ways, we're benefiting from it. If we had the choice, we would have preferred to win it without the pandemic rather than with the pandemic.
Of course, absolutely. But I guess the key point then is, how do you keep momentum going?
Exactly, and that's, I think, will be the thing. So when we come out of the pandemic, Tide will very, very strongly focus on helping people make most out of the recovery. And I think this is a very, very important one. So at the moment, we are, as a country, focused on, saving SMEs where we can, and that's a very, very important goal at the stage that we're at. But as we hopefully go into Q1 or Q2, we are working with many people in government and parliament, industry associations, sort of on encouraging everyone to think of, how do we want to build back, right, and grow out of this world. And so Tide will do a lot to support net zero, to support the leveling up in the north. Female entrepreneurship is another really big initiative that Tide supports. And so we will actually help SMEs get out of the recovery more strongly. And many people that may, have always thought about starting a business may, because of the dynamics of the COVID crisis, have lost their regular employment, now wanting to take the step to go into the entrepreneurial challenge. We will help those becoming, taking the first steps in building and starting up new businesses.
And it's a very positive story, isn't it? The fact that Tide have not benefited, but have used the pandemic. It's been an opportunity for you as a company, but that you want to help your customers as much as grow your own business. And so my final question to you is, what milestones you have set? How will you achieve that? How will you help your customers grow as you have through the pandemic?
Yeah, so, the next 2 to 3 quarters, we're really there about giving support of how to, get through the crisis, right? If you want, if you're an affected SME, and we will continue to be available and open for new people that want to start out during the pandemic and take the business opportunities that for them arise through bigger digitization or in sectors that are benefiting more broadly from the pandemic. As we get out of that crisis, we will really relentlessly focus on driving entrepreneurship. So we are convinced that the building back, remember, 50% of UK employment before the crisis was with SMEs. So the way we get through the presumed and unfortunate effect of higher unemployment will be to drive the SME sector. And so we're really preparing that when that time comes to help people take the initiatives to go into entrepreneurship. So these are really the 2 phases that we see, and we are spending a lot of time and a lot of effort getting ourselves ready for that.
It's been fascinating to talk to you. I wish you the very best of luck and look forward to seeing that trajectory continue. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.